The first thing Luke Callahan saw was not the wrecked carriage. It was her hand, half buried in snow. Still, the wind screamed across the Montana plains, lifting snow into twisting walls that swallowed the world whole. Luke leaned low over his horse. Bess, ice frozen into his beard, lashes stiff with frost. The storm had already taken 3 calves that afternoon. It wanted more. Then Bess stopped. The mare snorted and refused another step. Luke squinted through the white chaos. A dark shape lay ahead. Not cattle, not rock, something broken. He slid down into snow up to his thighs. Each step felt like walking through wet cement. His hand rested near his revolver as he moved closer. A blue carriage lay shattered on its side. Fine silk dresses whipped through the air like flags of surrender. A dead horse lay twisted nearby, eyes open and frozen. No driver, no guard, just drag marks cutting through the snow. Luke followed them. 20 steps, 30. Then he saw her, curled against the wind, half covered, small. He turned her over. Her face was pale blue. Ice clung to her dark lashes. Her lips barely moved with breath. He pressed his fingers to her neck. Nothing. Then a faint pulse, once, again. Luke let out a slow breath through cracked lips. "Not today," he muttered. He wrapped her in his heavy coat and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, like lifting a bundle of sticks. Getting her onto Bess nearly cost him balance, but he managed. He climbed up behind her and pulled her close against his chest. Her body felt wrong. Too cold. The ride home was blind. Wind struck like knives. Snow filled his ears. He bent over her frozen hair and spoke low into it. "Stay with me." The cabin appeared like a shadow in the storm. Luke kicked the door open and carried her inside. The wind slammed the door shut behind them. Silence. Only the fire pit waited. He struck a match with shaking hands. Flames caught, wood cracked. Heat slowly pushed back the cold. He laid her near the fire and cut away her frozen boots. He turned his face aside while removing soaked silk and lace. The fabric did not belong in this wilderness. It belonged in city halls and polished floors. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Snow melted in a kettle. He rubbed her hands slowly until her fingers turned red instead of white. For a long moment she did not move. Then, a cough, weak. Her eyes fluttered open, gray, clear, sharp. She jerked upright at the sight of him. "Easy," Luke said, palms raised. She looked around the cabin. Log walls, rifle over the door, animal skins. A stranger with frost in his beard watching her carefully. "Where am I?" Her voice scraped like dry leaves. "My place. Found you in the snow." Her breathing quickened. "My carriage," she whispered. "Were there men?" "Dead horse." That's all. Her jaw tightened. That reaction stayed with him. Later, as she sipped broth from a tin cup, she said her name was Anna. Luke nodded. He did not believe her. Out here, a person had a right to silence. Night came heavy. The storm slammed the cabin walls hard enough to make the window rattle. Luke lay near the door with his rifle across his chest. She took the bunk. After midnight, she began to murmur. "No, not his." Luke sat up. "They can't take it." Then clearly, "Langley." Luke's eyes narrowed. Langley Ranch, the largest spread in Montana territory. Half the valley carried that name. Before he could think further, she bolted upright, breathing hard. He crossed the room and steadied her shoulders. "Just wind," he said. Her forehead pressed briefly against his chest before she realized it, and pulled back. By morning, the storm still raged. She stood near the fire, wrapped in his blanket. "My name isn't Anna," she said quietly. He waited. "Victoria." He nodded once. "That fits better." She watched him carefully. "My father died 2 months ago," she said. "He left me everything," she swallowed. "A foreman named Morgan believes it should be his." Luke fed wood into the fire. "He says my father promised him the land," she continued. "When I refused to sign papers, my carriage was attacked." Her fingers tightened around the cup. I was on my way to file the will with the territorial marshal. Luke said nothing for a long time. Then, I know men who think land belongs to the loudest gun. She studied him. You sound like you've known that kind. He looked at the fire. I know about leaving places behind. Outside, wolves howled, close, too close. Bess screamed from the lean-to. Luke grabbed his rifle. Stay inside. He stepped into the blue twilight. Gunshots cracked. Snarls tore through the wind, then silence. When he came back inside, blood ran down his sleeve. A wolf had caught his arm before he put it down. Victoria did not panic. She cleaned the wound with whiskey. Her hands were steady. Her eyes did not shake. As she stitched his arm, their faces were inches apart. The cabin felt smaller, warmer. Something unspoken shifted in that firelight. On the third morning, the storm finally broke. Luke rode to the ridge to check the valley. From high ground, he saw them. 6 riders moving slow through deep snow. Not cattlemen, hunters. He followed from distance. One dropped a leather saddle tag. Luke picked it up, burned into the leather, Morgan. He raced back to the cabin. 6 riders, he said. They'll be here by dark. Victoria stared at the tag. Her shoulders straightened. I am Victoria Elizabeth Langley, she said. The wind outside had gone still, but something worse was coming. By dusk, horses surrounded the cabin. A voice called out from the snow. Send the woman out, rancher. You walk away. Luke stood behind log wall, rifle steady. She's not stepping outside. Gunfire exploded. Logs splintered. The war had arrived. Part 2. Gunfire tore through the night like splitting wood. Luke fired once. A man dropped from his saddle and vanished into snow. Victoria knelt beside the crate of cartridges, hands moving fast, passing fresh rounds without looking at him. Another shot cracked. Wood splintered above the door. Luke stepped sideways, fired again. A second rider pitched forward. The rest scattered for cover behind drifts and trees. Smoke hung thick inside the cabin. Luke's wounded arm trembled. He shifted the rifle to his left. Outside, Morgan's voice carried across the yard. This ain't worth dying for, Callahan. Send her out. Luke spat into the dirt floor. Come take her. A bullet tore through the window frame. Victoria ducked but did not scream. She crawled toward the back wall and pushed another rifle into his hand. Her eyes met his. No hesitation. Just a quiet nod. The shooting slowed. Morgan pulled his riders back into the trees. This ain't over, he shouted. We'll be back with daylight. Hoofbeats faded. Silence returned. Luke reloaded slowly. Victoria stood near the door, breathing steady, face pale but firm. 2 bodies lay frozen outside the cabin. The snow around them turned dark. They'll circle wide, Luke said. Wait for us to freeze or starve. Victoria stepped closer to the door and looked out through the crack. We don't wait, she said. Morning came hard and bright. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean. Luke buried the dead without words. No markers, no prayers. Just snow. He packed what little food and ammunition remained. Victoria saddled Bess without being asked. She moved differently now, less like a guest, more like someone who had decided something. They rode south before noon. The wind cut sharp, but the sky stayed clear. Luke's arm burned with every movement. By afternoon, fever warmed his skin under layers of wool. Victoria felt it when she held his waist to steady herself. You're burning up, she said quietly. Ride, he answered. The Langley Ranch rose at sunset, wide valley, big house, smoke from the chimney. Morgan had not waited for winter to clear. He was already inside. Luke hid the horses in an aspen grove. You stay here, he said. She stepped past him. No. They moved low along the barn wall. Voices drifted from the open parlor window. Morgan laughed inside. The girl froze in that storm, he said. Soon as the pass clears, the papers get filed. Ranch is mine. Victoria's hands tightened into fists. They are erasing me, she whispered. Before Luke could stop her, she stepped into the yard. "Morgan." Her voice carried across the valley. The front door burst open. Morgan stood framed in lamplight, rifle in hand. Shock crossed his face. "You." Luke ran forward. Gunfire exploded. Luke shot first. The man on the porch fell backward through the doorway. Another rushed from the side and dropped into snow. Morgan fired. The bullet slammed into Luke's shoulder. He staggered but stayed upright. Blood soaked through his coat. Morgan stepped closer, smiling. "You again, Callahan. Still shooting Foreman." Victoria froze. "Foreman?" she said. Morgan turned his eyes toward her. 10 years back, Kansas, Abe Selby. Your father's foreman. Shot dead by this man." The words hung in the cold air. Victoria looked at Luke. He swayed, jaw tight. "It wasn't like that," he said. Morgan raised his revolver toward Luke's head. Victoria moved. She grabbed the iron poker leaning by the porch and hurled it. It struck Morgan's arm. The shot flew wide. Luke lunged, tackling him into the snow. They struggled. Luke's strength faded fast. Morgan shoved him off and stood, gun rising again. Victoria dragged Luke backward by his collar. Bullets tore into the barn behind them. They stumbled toward the grove. Luke nearly collapsed before reaching the horses. She pushed him into the saddle and mounted behind him. They rode into the hills under a sky, turning black. Night found them in a hollow between pine trees. Luke slipped from the saddle and fell hard into snow. Victoria dropped beside him. His shoulder bled through her hands. The wolf bite on his arm looked dark and swollen. She tore strips from her skirt and pressed them against the wound. "Stay awake," she said. His breathing came shallow. "Didn't run," he murmured. "Fair draw." She held his head against her chest and listened. The valley below lay silent. No riders followed. Cold crept in slow. She did not sleep. At dawn, his chest still rose and fell. She stood and looked toward the ranch. Smoke still climbed from the chimney. Morgan believed they were fleeing. He believed wrong. She helped Luke onto the horse again. He barely held the reins. They rode back as the sun broke over the ridge. No hiding this time. No creeping along barns. Victoria rode straight down the open slope toward the house. Morgan stepped onto the porch when he saw them. "You came back to beg?" he called. Victoria slid from the saddle. "I am Victoria Elizabeth Langley," she said clearly. "This land is mine." Morgan laughed. He raised his gun. Luke staggered behind her, unarmed. The shot rang out. Luke fell to the porch steps. Morgan stepped forward, revolver lowering toward Luke's head. Victoria lifted Luke's spare gun. Her hands were steady. Her father's voice lived in her memory. "Do not pull. Squeeze." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "You ain't got it in you," she squeezed. The gunshot cracked through the valley. Morgan's body jerked. He looked down at his chest. Then he fell face first into snow. Silence followed. The remaining men ran. Victoria dropped the gun and knelt beside Luke. Blood covered the porch. His eyes fluttered. Still breathing, she dragged him inside. The fight for the ranch was not finished. It had just changed shape. Luke did not wake when she dragged him across the polished floor. Blood marked a path from the porch to the parlor rug. Victoria shut the door with her heel and barred it. Her hands moved fast. She tore open his coat. The bullet had passed clean through the shoulder, but the flesh looked torn and swollen. The wolf bite on his other arm had turned dark at the edges. She poured whiskey over both wounds. Luke's body jerked. His eyes opened halfway. "Still here," he muttered. "Quiet," she said. She pressed linen hard against the bleeding and tied it tight. Then she heated water and cleaned the bite again, scraping away the blackened skin with steady fingers. He clenched his jaw, but did not cry out. Outside, hooves thundered in the distance. Morgan's men were retreating. For now, Victoria pulled Luke onto the settee near the fire. The big house felt strange with only the two of them inside it. Too wide. too silent. She fed him spoonfuls of broth through the night. When fever took him, she wiped his face with cool cloths. At dawn, the yard lay empty. Morgan's body still, face down in snow. She stepped outside alone. The valley was quiet under pale light. She dragged Morgan by the collar toward the rock pile near the barn. Her boots left deep marks behind her. No speech, no tears, just work. By noon, she had covered him with stone. When she returned inside, Luke was awake. Barely. "You should left," he said. She sat beside him. "I am not leaving my land again." He tried to lift his right arm. It shook and fell back useless. His left hand flexed stiffly, the skin scarred from the wolf's teeth. He looked at both hands in silence. The man who had faced riders without blinking now stared at his own fingers like strangers. Days passed. Snow melted slow from the fields. Victoria sent a ranch hand she trusted into town with a message for the territorial marshal. Until Law arrived, they stayed inside. Luke healed, but not clean. His shoulders stiffened, his right hand no longer held steady when he tried to grip a cup. The fast draw he once relied on was gone. He tested it one afternoon in the yard. He reached for his revolver. His hand lagged. The barrel dipped. He lowered it without a word. Victoria watched from the porch. He did not see her. When the marshal finally rode in with 2 deputies, he found Morgan buried and the forged will laid open on the dining table. Victoria stood straight beside the ledger. "This is my father's signature," she said, "and this is Morgan's lie." The marshal studied both papers. He glanced at Luke, pale and wrapped in bandages. "You were at the cabin?" he asked. Luke nodded once. "She saved me," Victoria said before the marshal could press further. The law took statements. The deputies removed Morgan's remaining men from the bunkhouse. By evening, the marshal declared the Langley ranch rightfully hers. No celebration followed. Only work, spring, pushed through the valley, slow but certain. Fences were mended. Cattle were counted. Hands returned, one by one. The bullet holes in the house stayed where they were. Victoria refused to plaster over them. Luke walked the fields when he could. His steps were slower now. He favored his shoulder. One evening, he saddled Bess quietly in the barn. He tightened the cinch with his left hand, awkward and stiff. Victoria stepped into the doorway. "You're leaving," he did not turn. "I bring trouble with me," he said. "Always have." She walked closer. "You brought yourself into a storm for someone you didn't know." He adjusted the saddle again. "I killed a man in Kansas," he said. "That part's true." She stopped in front of him. "And you carried that with you into every winter since." He looked at her then. The barn smelled of hay and dust. Light from the setting sun cut across the floorboards. "I ain't the same man," he said quietly. Glancing at his weakened hand, she took that hand and placed it flat against her chest. "You stayed," she said. "When others ran?" His fingers trembled under her palm. The horses shifted in their stalls. Outside, wind moved gently through thawing grass. He did not pull his hand away. Summer came warm and bright. They rode side by side across the upper ridge one afternoon. Cattle dotted the valley below like scattered stones. Luke guided Bess carefully, his right arm still tight. Victoria rode close enough that their knees brushed. He glanced at her and shook his head slightly. "Didn't know I was dragging the richest woman in Montana out of a snowdrift," he said. She looked ahead at the wide land stretching under blue sky. "You weren't," she replied. "You were dragging a woman who didn't want to disappear." They rode on. Below them, the Langley ranch stood whole again. The wind carried no gunfire, only open space, and the long road waiting ahead.